Hello, world. Hello, Love Army. Thank you so much for joining tonight's teach-in, Is Unity What We Need? My name is Kalia, and I'm the National Coordinator for the Love Army, which is a home for changemakers who want to build love plus power. So if that sounds like you can sign up on our Facebook page or at lovearmy.org. This teach-in is part of our Summer of Love and Resistance, which is 10 weeks of teach-ins, actions, and events. Part of which is our partnership with Van Jones and Rock Nation on the We Rise tour, which may be coming to a town near you. So if you check out the link below, you can see if we'll be coming to your town. We are really lucky tonight to have two of the best people and best minds that I know. We have Jennifer Bailey here with us, who's been named one of the 15 faith leaders to watch by the Center for American Progress. Reverend Bailey is an ordained minister, a public theologian, an emerging national leader in multi-faith movements for justice. She's the executive director for Faith Matters Network and co-founder of the People's Supper, a national campaign building community through shared meals focused on healing and bridging the rupture at the heart of our democracy. An Ashoka Fellow and Nathan Cummings Foundation Fellow, Reverend Bailey is an ordained itinerant elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. You can follow her on Twitter at Rev Jen Bailey. And then we have Amer Ahmed, who serves as the Director of Intercultural Teaching and Faculty Development at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He's also the faculty at the Summer and Winter Institutes for the Intercultural Communication and a member of Speak Out, Institute for Democratic Leadership and Culture. He is a social justice educator, a hip hop activist, a diversity consultant and college administrator, and channeling his diverse experiences into work geared towards facilitating effective change processes. He's been featured on MSNBC's Melissa Harris Perry and in Dr. Shakti Butler's film on racism entitled Cracking the Codes. So we are going to have quite a good discussion here about really the state of our world and where do we go from here and how do we work together and how do we move forward in a better way. If you have questions that come up as we're talking, you can leave them in the comments below, or you can join the Twitter chat in Twitter with the hashtag LoveArmyLive. So I'm going to pass it to you, Jen. Tell us what you think about Is Unity What We Need?
Hey, good night, everybody. Good evening. I'm so happy to be with you. I am actually at home in Chicago, Illinois, my hometown. I am a Southside girl, so I'm excited to be calling from my hometown. I usually am in Nashville, Tennessee, so have a lot of experience living in a little blue and a big sea of red down in Tennessee. And when I was originally thinking about this question, is unity what we need? The first thing that came up for me was a story. So it was the weekend of inauguration this year, the weekend of January 20th, and I found myself in Atlanta, Georgia, at a convention of interfaith student activists. So folks from colleges and universities around the country who are interested in engaging this question of whether or not interfaith strategies, so strategies across lines of religious difference, including those who are not religious at all, could be a way for us to move forward. And I sat on a panel with a colleague of mine who's a pastor in the Unitarian Universalist Church. And it was the same weekend that the travel ban happened. And so I'm looking out at the sea of college students, some who voted for our president, some who did not, Black and brown and white youth. And I said to the group the same thing that I believe, that these times call for a different sort of leadership. And for some folks, that leadership means engaging and bridging across lines of difference. For other folks, this moment is a moment of healing where we go back into our communities and really try to fortify those communities through strategies of resilience and healing. And after I was done speaking, a young Muslim girl approached me. She was a South Asian Muslim girl from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who had been at this conference, right? This good liberal conference in many ways all weekend. And she said to me, this is the first time that I feel like someone spoke up for me. All weekend, I've had people apologizing to me for the travel ban, apologizing to me for voting for the president, and I never really felt seen. I felt like a token. And I carry that young woman's story with me and have over the past several months, in part because it raises a very interesting question for me, particularly around this question of unity. For so long, and my colleague Dr. Robin Henderson Espinoza talks about this in their writing, unity in the United States has meant sameness. It's meant that we have collected ourselves around a common shared identity, whether that be draping ourselves in a flag. Far too often it's been rooted in a particular type of militarism. But what if, rather than viewing unity as sameness, we began to explore the opportunities of what it means to be unified in our radical differences? And I think that is the challenge of the 21st century. Because for a lot of millennials, and I think we see this in activism work across the United States right now, people don't want to give up the particularity of their stories. I certainly don't. As a Black girl from the South Side who is a uber Christian, Black church preaching, God-loving, God-fearing social justice advocate who strives for inclusion of all people, right? I want to be able to bring my full self to the table. But that means encountering people whose stories might be very different from mine. And if we can find a way to hear each other's stories, to really honor one another in the particularities of our difference and view that difference as a strength and not a weakness, I think this question of unity can begin to be reframed for the society in which we're aspiring towards, which in my mind is a society that is geared towards the liberation of all. I can't be free unless all of my siblings are free. And so when I think about this question of unity, it begins with definition. What do we mean when we say unity? Unified for what? To what end? And if I have to give up part of myself for the sake of your quote unquote unity, that's not freedom. That's not liberation. And most importantly, that's not love.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful and perfect questions. What are we united for, and what does unity mean? What does that look like? Amer, what do you think? Hold on one moment. You are still muted. Let's see if we can. Okay, I think we're good. Try again. Nope. Are you still on the phone there, or are you? Okay. Let's see. Jen, I'm going to pass it back to you to just talk a little bit about some of your experience around unity in some of your work with the Faith Matters Network while I work on getting Amer back on here. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. So for those of you joining us tonight, Faith Matters Network is a people of color-led collective based in Nashville, Tennessee, that really seeks to amplify the voices of spiritually rooted, justice-oriented leaders who are trying to make a difference from the deepest wells of their spiritual selves. Most recently, we've become engaged through a project called the People's Supper, which was launched on Inauguration Day, January 20th. Understanding that in the post-election moment, it was really striking to us that we didn't know. We didn't know what to do, right? There was a sense for us that, like I said earlier, there are two different needs really being articulated in communities: the opportunity to create healing spaces and the opportunity to bridge across these lines of radical difference. And so over the past 6 months, we've hosted over 500 dinners in 50 cities across the United States, really geared towards the question of what does it mean for us to see one another as human again? And can that be the starting point in repairing the breach that is so deeply at the heart of our democracy right now?
Awesome, thank you. Always some tech challenge, and we'll talk a little bit more about your work on those projects coming soon. But let's try again. Amer, are you there? All right. I'm going to call you back in. I'm going to listen to some experimental music. Sorry, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us here. We will get there together one of these moments. All right. Should be getting a call in 1 second. You there? Nope. All right. We're going to have our tech genies behind the scene work on resolving that problem. And Jen, it's just you and me for a minute here. So one thing that's really important to us about these teach-ins is to really give people something to do and to learn, and not just have it be information, but also have it be tangible and useful, and helping to really build up a group of people who have a set of skills and a set of understanding, who can be more effective in leading in their communities and in their organizations and in their lives. So we usually do this towards the end of the call, but Jen, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about Brave Space and the work you're doing with that, with the People's Supper.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that has been really important to us in the work of the People's Supper is setting a context for us to engage with one another. And our work around what we've been calling Brave Space is really the genius of Mickey Scott Bay-Jones, the Director of Healing Justice Initiatives at Faith Matters Network, who we call the Justice Doula, because she is interested in, vocationally, is all about how we birth more justice, more love, and more shalom into the world. And as part of our practice, because I think it's really important when we talk about movements, right? And part of this is my own background as somebody who is a person of faith, but even our social movement spaces have liturgies, right? They have movements. So one of the things that we do as a non-religious space at the People's Supper is start each one of our gatherings with a reading of a poem called An Invitation to Brave Space. And we found this poem to be useful in a number of ways. We've developed rituals around it. We've invited people to read it popcorn style. We've returned to it. We've used it in a lot of different contexts in our organizing. In lieu of safe space guidelines, we've used Brave Space as a context to setting that. And so I thought one thing that I would do with you all tonight is just share this invitation to Brave Space written by Mickey Scott Bay-Jones that has become such a hallmark of our relationship building through the People's Supper campaign. And it reads, "Together we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side." So for our team at Faith Matters Network and with the People's Supper, Brave Space is really that intersection, that space between personal and social transformation. We understand that for many people who are embodied like me, brown-skinned folks whose very identities place them on the margins, there is no such thing for safe spaces during these times, nor has there ever historically been a safe space for us. And so that's why we invite people to a space of moral courage and to be brave. And so I'm happy to share with this community some of the rituals that we've developed, along with our ritual zine from the People's Supper, to help you set the context in whatever your organizing spaces might be.
Awesome. Thank you. I love that poem so much. I think it touches on so many of the questions that come up around unity and how we work together. So I really appreciate that. All right. We're going to try one more time. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yay.
Oh, great. Oh, wonderful.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I have no idea what that was about, but it was great to hear all that wonderful wisdom. Just to go back to what I originally said was that I did also have the same question about what do we mean by unity, and I definitely think that any kind of blind effort, blind unity, blind nationalism, blind patriotism is dangerous, and so because unity can also connote for some people conformity and the giving up and the giving in of the things that make a person distinctly who they are and allow us to discern the gradients of difference that exist between us and for us to lose the value and the beauty of that. And so how do we hold the fact that we have our multiplicity, we have our complexity, we have the things that make us similar and different in relationship to one another at the same time, while also being able to be empathetic to experiences that are very unfamiliar for us, while also holding the fact that I might be oppressed and marginalized at the same time. And I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that we face, is that how do we honor the ways in which we experience being marginalized, while also being able to hold the fact that we have our own unearned privileges as well, and the need to be able to empathize with other experiences. And one of the things that I see in terms of the moment that we're in, and you mentioned that you're in the south side of Chicago and normally in Tennessee, and I was born and raised in Ohio, and I've lived most of my life in the Midwest, and I currently live in the Northeast, and I'm in Massachusetts right now, where I live now. And, it's been an interesting experience for me to be in the Northeast the last 2 years during this political environment when I lived my whole life in the Midwest, and kind of experienced a lot of the disconnect from a lot of people in this area, from people who are in the middle of the country who view places like where I've lived as Trump country or red country or whatever, when I know from my experience it's a lot more complicated than that. And people saying, well, you must experience a lot of racism there, as if I don't experience racism here in Massachusetts because it's a blue state or something like that. And so I think that my experience across those different spaces, as well as being embodied as a South Asian brown Muslim man, has kind of allowed me to kind of move across spaces and to see connections and differences and opportunities to potentially to build bridges that maybe sometimes isn't always recognized by some other people that I might meet around me. And it doesn't mean that when I'm seeking to build those bridges that I'm dishonoring my experience. It means that I'm holding myself accountable to be empathic and to try to understand another experience, irrespective of the ways in which I'm experiencing marginality in some other way. And when I talk about empathy, I'm not talking about just blindly accepting someone else's experience for what it is. It's about validating that experience as true for that person, irrespective of what I think. So I don't have to agree, right? But if we don't cultivate the ability to empathize, it's going to be very difficult to be able to understand why people are positioned and may hold certain perspectives that one has. And so for me, growing up in a post-industrial kind of middle American town and watching those jobs go away and watching, the lack of opportunities for multiple groups of people, although, some may have experienced racism and some didn't, there was a lot of people of a lot of different backgrounds experiencing serious economic hardship. And when we start to understand the history of the country, we start to understand the way in which people are positioned in relationship to one another to view each other as the enemy, in order for us to be able to not pay attention to people who are benefiting from the marginality of a whole swath of people. And that historically that's been really how and why race was constructed in the first place. I try to talk to people about, to try to remember that there was a lot of poor people in the South, white people, who stood to benefit nothing from slavery, who fought and died in the hundreds of thousands in droves to defend the wealth of rich people that they did not gain any economic benefit from. And in many ways, I feel like we're in a similar time where the kinds of constructs that divide us, oftentimes, when we're only operating from our positionality in relationship to one another, and that we're not necessarily seeing that bigger design of systemically what's playing out and the way we're being positioned in relationship to one another, to be able to look at each other so that we're not looking at who's really benefiting from the divide. And so how do we use that to be able to find opportunities to understand one another and create the potential to build unity around our shared experiences, the things that we can build around, and also work through the very real differences and inequities that exist across those various experiences.
Great, thank you. Definitely a complicated question, no doubt about that. So I wonder, Jen, I really appreciated you saying basically you shouldn't have to give up a part of yourself to be in unity with, or in solidarity with, or work with people. But I wonder if there is, and this is a question for both of you, but I wonder if moving towards some form of unity does require us to change. And if so, how it requires us to change.
Yeah, I think so. So I think when I talked a little bit earlier about not wanting to give up part of myself, I think what I really meant was that I don't want to give up part of my story and the stories that have contributed to making me who I am. The stories of my great-grandmother, right, escaping Arkansas underneath a wagon because my great-granddad had registered Black people to vote and the KKK was knocking on their door, right? Like that story is part of an ancestral legacy that I'm a part of, and I'm part of a community that is co-creating that narrative moving forward. But I think, Kalia, to your point, one of the beauties about encountering radical difference is that to truly approach that question of difference from an open-hearted space, from a space of real, deep, empathic desire to get to know the other, I think we are transformed, or have the ability or opportunity to be transformed by getting to know the stories of others who don't share our same life experiences. For me, as a person of faith, I very much root that in my own tradition. In the book of Genesis, we talk about people being made in the image of God and all of creation being made in God's image. Well, that's not easy, right? Because if I'm made in the image of God, according to my tradition, right, that means that Trump supporter over there, who I disagree with on 99.9% of political issues, is also made in the image of God. That's a challenge, right? That challenges me to then think about, well, what is the God presence in that person? And I don't think it's specific to faith traditions, right? But one of the challenges of us growing into a more loving and deeply compassionate community where all folks are valued means encountering other people's stories that we might not like and approaching those stories with a deep sense of humanity. And I think if we can get past this defensiveness that we've developed, and out of good reason, right? There's a reason why I don't always trust sitting across from a white person in specific spaces, or, a man in certain spaces. There's a reason behind that, because of years and years and generations of trauma that's associated with those type of relationships. And one of my great challenges then is to approach the table, certainly with a healthy dose of skepticism, but also a willingness to be transformed in my engagement with the quote unquote other, right? Through that storytelling, I think it can be a pathway, even if it's just a little opening, to a taste of what our liberation can look like by getting to know one another as human again.
Amer, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that what you said was really profound, and it really connects to what I was wanting to speak on, which how profoundly important healing is in this process. Because there is so much trauma from the way in which people have been marginalized, and it creates a very understandable response when there's distrust, and especially when there hasn't been a lot of evidence in that person's experience to the contrary. And so to what degree do we engage in processes of healing and support one another in that process of healing in order to be able to get to a place in which we can start to take risks again, or at least in certain situations and circumstances where we can try to potentially empathize with an experience that may be very different from our own, in which there may be marginality in a different way than we're familiar with. And I think that happens in that needs to happen in a lot of different directions. And part of the reason why I think it's so important is when we model that for other people, it puts down, in my experience, it puts down the defenses of people who feel like they're about to be attacked for being white, for being male, for being straight, for whatever it is. There's a sense of, why I shouldn't have to apologize for being white or for being a man. And look, patriarchy was created tens of thousands of years before I was born here, but I benefit from it. So to what degree can I own the fact that there is that historical and systemic inequity that has played out that influences and impacts significant aspects of the way in which we experience reality and society and each other? And to what degree can we understand that we've been positioned to have certain kinds of experiences? We've been positioned to not be able to see and to recognize the inequity. And so one of the things I talk about a lot is privilege is like a wind at your face versus a wind at your back. When you have a wind at your back, you don't even realize you have a tailwind behind you. But when you have a wind in your face, you're really aware of it. It doesn't mean that it's going to stop you from where you want to go necessarily, but it's going to make it a lot harder, and you're going to be really, really aware of it. And that has a lot of impact on our interactions with each other, because when we're interacting with somebody with the wind in their face, who's very aware of that experience, is talking to someone with the wind of their back who has no idea that has anything to do with what's going on in the encounter, I think it's very difficult to bridge that divide. But what happens when we start to all do our own work? Because we all have some kinds of privileges and some kind of marginality in different kinds of ways. And so what happens when we come together and say we all have our own work to do? It's different work, but as a result, I'm not creating an expectation of you that I don't hold for myself, and so I'm going to hold myself accountable too in this process of engaging, and not just expect everybody else to do it and wait for you to figure it out until you get to where I expect you to be. I don't know if we can really bridge a divide when we position ourselves in a place where we cannot grow, where we cannot change, as your question asked. And the reality is change is inevitable. The question is are we going to, which way are we going to change? And so, my mentor says that change is inevitable, progress is optional. And so I think every experience we have shapes and impacts us. So then the question becomes, what do we do with in our understanding of ourselves, and how we negotiate and respond to that?
Really great. I think it would be fair to call you both, or one thing that we could call you is bridge builders. You both have done a lot of work very intentionally to reach beyond your immediate bubble and to connect with people who are not like you. And that can be really vulnerable, I think, in a lot of directions, within your own communities, within the communities you're trying to connect with. And I wonder if you have any advice or insights for other people who are trying to do that work and are feeling isolated or just feeling the challenge of it, and how you sort of stay centered in that work.
Amer, I'll kick it off to you first. I think I want to sit with that and think about it for a minute.
I was thinking that you were going to speak first, so remind me the question again. I heard it, but
yeah, just how you keep yourself centered and kind of navigate the challenges of being someone who's building bridges.
There's definitely criticism from your own community, and my journey is definitely involves coming from a culture in which you're supposed to listen to what everybody tells you, and especially your elders and your parents, and they in many ways tell you who you are and what you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do with your life. When you make choices in your life that aren't consistent with that, it's not just you've made it, I disagree with it, it's you're disrespectful. And so that process for me was an inward process. And this is why I think for me, beyond just empathy, I think self-awareness is the foundation for anything in relationship to our ability to be able to understand and empathize with other experiences, because our understanding of ourselves is the reference point to be able to understand what makes us who we are in relationship to other people, and makes us aware and recognize that. And so for me, I had a very inward process of coming into a deep reflection about who I felt like I was and I am, and who I was becoming, and what I felt like I was put here to do, what my gifts, what my talents were. I believe everybody has those things. And then trying to listen to that and find in some kind of way to filter all the messaging of what I'm being told respectfully, to listen and to hear and to try to draw from wisdom, while also trying to recognize how does that fit in relationship to who I believe I am and what I was put here to do. And there's all these distractions in the society that's distracting us from ourselves. And I think that process of coming into that understanding of self is so foundational to our ability to be able to understand who other people are, that I think it's very difficult to build bridges without having done that work. From my experience, the people that I tend to meet who are bridge builders tend to be very self-aware human beings, and that gives them the anchor and the ability to be able to navigate who they are in relationship to everybody else.
I really appreciate that that metaphor of the anchor, because I think as we talk about bridging work, one thing I found to be really important is that notion of feeling grounded in who you are. I would love to say that I am a bridge builder by choice, but that just isn't the reality of my experience. I grew up in a small Midwestern town, Quincy, Illinois, that when my parents moved there in 1992, when I was, 3-4 years old, was 95% white and 5% everybody else. And, the first time I was made to feel less than human because of the color of my skin, I was 5 and told I was dirty and called a nigger and told that I was less than human, And that was a lesson that I learned very early on in my life. And I think that that experience of otherness, of isolation, gave me a sense that it's my thirst for justice and equity, right? Like, I don't want anybody else to feel like that. And I think for those of us who are part of communities that are, I don't know if I like the word marginalized, but who are minorities, the reality is that we are in many ways told and have to engage with the outside world in a world that is inherently hostile to us. And so for me, the question became around this notion of self-awareness. I'll be honest with you, it took a lot of therapy, a lot of years of decoding the messages that I was told. It's work that I still do, to be able to enter a posture that was open-hearted, to do that bridging work with others. I think one of the other reasons why it's important to me to do bridging work is because I see the pain that many of my beloved siblings are in, who have been hurt by white supremacy, who've been hurt by classism, and don't have the time nor the energy to engage difference, right? Because of where they are in their own journeys around trauma and healing. And so I count it a blessing and a privilege to be able to do that translational work. And at the same time, I know that I would not be able to do that translational work if I didn't have an anchor. And an anchor for me are I call them my core crew. Those friends, those chosen family and birth family who remind me of who I am truly, in those moments that I can't see it quite clearly enough. And so I just really appreciate, like, part of the work of bridging is being grounded, it's being anchored, it's being self-aware. I love that framework, in order to then step up, because otherwise you get lost in a cycle. You become, far too often for those of us who are people of color, we become that token, right? We become an abstraction rather than a fully realized and actualized person with thoughts and dreams and hopes in our own stories. And so my advice to anybody who is really serious about undertaking this bridging work on is to get anchored, to know your own story, and to surround yourself in a community of accountability with folks who love you for you, who can remind you of who you are when you even forget it.
Thank you both for sharing that. That is really, just thank you. We will go to questions from the audience. So if you guys have questions out there, please feel free to put them in the comments. But first, I thought, Amer, you've talked a lot so beautifully about self-awareness and just the role that plays in this work. And I think you have mentioned an exercise or a practice that you have that's helped you cultivate that. I wonder if you could share that.
Yeah, and I want to say something in response to what Jen just shared. I just need to say, first of all, thank you for sharing that, because I think what you just did was model the vulnerability that being a bridge builder is and requires. And so I just want to honor that and thank you for sharing that, because it's not easy. And I mean, I want people to actually visualize a bridge, and like land masses on both sides, and the risk and the vulnerability it takes to step out in the middle of that bridge when nobody else is willing to stand on that bridge, and know whether or not that they have solid ground under them, and that other people will feel like they can join you out there on that bridge, and trust that it's a space that's safe enough to engage. And I think that that's the situation and circumstances that a lot of us who do this work find ourselves in, and it is rooted in a lot of traumatic experiences and having to work through a lot of things. And for me, it was about not being white or black, and I was in an environment where everybody was either white or black, essentially, and moving between, and again, not by choice, being a bridge and having experiences and seeing people, and then being invisibilized by white folks, typically, or also being the token person of color for them, and also feeling comfortable to ask me things about Black people that they wouldn't ask Black people. So all of those things have had very deep impact on me. So again, that makes self-awareness critically important. And one practice that I've learned from some mentors of mine is something called personal leadership practices. And there's going to be a resource shared by LoveArmy. It's called, their website's plseminars.com. They have a book about this. And they talk about kind of that internal process of what goes on with us when we engage other people and something comes up. That's the language that they use. Recognizing that something comes up in you, and it could be, so in many ways this is the language that they use around the idea of conflict. And conflict not necessarily always being physical, but just when there's dissonance or something, especially because we've been when we've been marginalized, we've experienced oppression and inequity in so many different ways. When we have encounters, things come up in the moment when we're having the interaction. And so what they encourage people to do is to engage what they refer to as a critical moment dialogue. So it's an internal dialogue that you have with yourself in that moment. And it's a practice. So you break apart that moment, and then by doing that, you learn how to do this over time in a more effective way, where to the point where in the moment you are able to respond. And so there's 6 main components of it, and they spend time with people breaking apart an example of a critical moment that for any individual may have had. So usually they'll ask you to go and spend time thinking about an encounter which you had, and then break apart that moment. So the first thing they talk about is aligning with vision. So what is your vision of who you are at your highest and best? What does that look like? Who is that person that you say that you are and that you're about? Cultivating stillness. So being able to calm yourself, attend to judgment. So what judgments am I making in this moment? Engage ambiguity. So what is it that I don't know in this situation? Attend to your emotions. So there's an emotional response that's going on. Are you aware of what emotions you're having? What are those emotions? And attending to the feeling body. So when you're having these moments, oftentimes there's a physical feeling that you're experiencing. So it could be tightness in your chest. So actually becoming aware of the fact that you're experiencing that. And so all 6 of these components coming into an awareness of all these different components in the moment, so that what they refer to as discern right action. So that you can respond in a way that really aligns with who you are at your highest and best, and who you want to be and how you want to operate in the world. I was on a call with Tim Bless, on a video with Tim Bless a couple weeks ago, and I talked about the difference between reacting versus responding. And that in reacting, oftentimes we're giving our power away to other people, and so it's like I was telling him, it's like, I don't want someone who's going to be stupid and say something stupid to me to mess up my mood. But I don't want to give them that power. So to what degree do I engage in a process of critical reflection where I can respond, and so where I can align with who I am. And if you think about the people that we really elevate in this work, we think about people like Gandhi. We think about people like Mandela. And these are people that we look to who are not just people who react, and we look at people like Bell Hooks, these people who come into this place of wisdom, and how do we try to find ways to be able to align with that kind of embodiment of self, rather than simply letting other people dictate to us how we're going to be in our encounters.
Thank you. That is a great tool. And we will be posting something in the comments with a link to the website he mentioned. And when we put this teach-in on the website, we'll also link to to more information about that. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we'll go to audience questions in just a moment, but I just have one more question, which is, this sounds like a lot of work. This sounds very hard. And I wonder why we would do it. So why do we want unity? You know, like, is it so that we can build enough power to win? Is it because it's the right thing to do? Is it unity towards the same exact vision? Is it unity in relationship? Why are we trying to build this unity?
I don't know that I have the perfect answer for that, because I think our reasons for seeking unity change and evolve over time, right? So the balance between the individual and the collective. I can say for myself, at this moment in July of 2017, I'm seeking unity because I'm tired of babies being killed, not just here in the US, but abroad. And I think that, you know, I think about my friend CJ just had a baby named MJ, who's a beautiful biracial girl, Black girl, right? But multiracial. And I think about the world that she is inheriting from us, a world defined by conflict, that is inherently violent to her personhood and her ability to grow and thrive. So I'm seeking unity and radical difference for MJ, for not just the generations that will follow today, but for the 7 generations to come, and for the 7 generations back, for whom I am the realization of a vision of unity. So that's me today. I don't know. Ask me a year from now, I might be much more bitter and be like, nope, if we're not building power to overturn X, Y, and Z, it's not worth it. And by the way, I don't want to deal with those people who disagree with me on X, Y, and Z issue, right? But you caught me in a moment today where that's my my vision. And I think it's a beautiful one. I mean, again, as a person of faith, you got Reverend Jen on the line. I also believe in this like image of what we in the Christian tradition talk about as the kingdom, or the kingdom of God on earth. And I don't think that exists in the hereafter. I think we aspire to that in the now. And that is a vision of collective liberation for all and full human flourishing. And we can only do that through conversations of unity and deep spiritual practice and self-awareness and accountability to that vision. So that's my answer today.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel that, you know, I just can't passively accept the world as it is today because of how incredibly violent and damaging it is. And I feel very, you know, especially given where my family comes from, you know, the odds of me being in a position where I can do something like what I'm doing with my life were slim to none. And so I feel a deep responsibility that, because I know that a lot of people don't have the time, energy, or circumstances to be able to invest in change making in this kind of way, based on a lot of circumstances I've seen throughout the world, including here. And so, to what degree can I use what I've been given to be able to empower others to be able to identify their gifts and their abilities to be able to be transformative, and in the face of systems of oppression, and to what degree can we engage people who are not aware of the fact that they are beneficiaries of that, about the ways in which we may need to work together to be able to dismantle those systems. Actually, we need to. We need to, because I just don't believe that the status quo is acceptable and or sustainable. There's a lot of this system that's been created is is not sustainable, based on my understanding of human history and humanity. And so it's my hope that we can transform it.
Cool. Thank you both. So a couple questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap up. We have a question from Angela. How do we create the opportunities with people of different ideologies when we live in homogeneous, like-minded communities?
Yeah, that's hard, right? Finding a true encounter with difference is hard because we've been systematically segregated from one another. We have Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds that sound a whole lot like we do. And so I would love, Amer, your thoughts on this too, but I think it's about creating and building genuine relationships with folks, which means going to where they are. And meeting them where they are. That means, I guess, if you live in a city, travel that 40 miles outside of your city, if you can, if you have the ability to, and the mobility to, and go to a rural town just outside. Observe, sit in the McDonald's. I don't know, growing up for me, the McDonald's was the coffee shop in town, right? And listen to the conversations that are going on. Introduce yourself. I think those are the types of rare opportunities. I would be remiss as a co-founder of the People's Supper to not say inviting people over to dinner is also one way, because we all need to eat and break bread. And specifically, we've developed some toolkits around bridging across lines of political and ideological difference at thepeoplessupper.org. And so I invite you to check those resources out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we live in a time in which we actually have more resources than ever before, like this technology that we're using right now. And, I mean, just, you know, as a person who, whether I like it or not, has had to do a lot of work around Islamophobia in terms of educating other people around the issues related to that, it's been amazing to me what basic information people have access to very clearly, but they don't unnecessarily tap into it. So it's about challenging yourself to even just branch out to new types of knowledge and information, and then in addition to other experiences. And I want to restate the self-awareness piece, because when one is aware of oneself, including your social identities, your experiences, your biases, your style, again, you have the reference point to be able to understand who other people are in relationship to you, and you have something to offer because you understand those things to about yourself. So it's not just about taking from other people, because a lot of times people feel like they've been taken from over and over and over again, and so you come along and you want to take more. And so when someone asks me, "What are you?" and I say, "What do you mean by that?" "Well, where are you from?" "Well, I'm from Ohio." No, where are you really from? Okay, it's like, you know, white folks don't get that second where are you really from thing. It's like, oh, if I said I was from Ohio, you can accept that answer, right? And so if you're self-aware enough to be able to understand that, okay, that expectation I have I should not have some special expectation of other people to share everything about themselves the moment they meet me. So I may need to offer things to others and share those things in order for other people to feel like, oh, okay, this person is sharing something of myself. Maybe there's not some agenda to try to take something from me. So maybe I'll be more willing to offer something to you about myself. But if you're not aware of what those things are for yourself, right, if you don't know that you have a culture, which is a big aspect of whiteness, the erasure of culture, and capitalism too, the erasure of culture. If you don't know what your culture is, you don't know what your identity experiences are, you don't know that that's a resource to offer somebody else in order to be able to create a level of comfort of other people to want to share when they're ready about themselves.
Great, thank you. And I just wanted to reinforce that plug for the People's Supper too. It's a really, really great project. They put a lot of thought into how to bring people together, both in their own communities to heal with their people they're already in relationship with, and also across difference. So there's a link in the comments for that as well, and really encourage you to see if there's a dinner happening near you to attend or host your own. Lots of support materials. So even if you've never done something like that, it's a great opportunity to try out some of what we've been discussing tonight. So we are almost at time, and I wonder, yeah, I think let's close it out here. And I wonder, Jen, if you could maybe take us out with the Brave Space poem again in just a minute. I think that'd be a great way to close. If you enjoyed this and want to learn more about other things, we're doing these teach-ins for the rest of the summer every Tuesday evening at this time. You can check our Facebook or lovearmy.org for a schedule. Next week we'll be talking about immigration and sanctuary and questions around that. So yeah, Jen, why don't you take us out? Thank you everybody so much for watching and joining us tonight. Really appreciate you both, Amer and Jen. It's been really great information. Thank you for the work you do in the world and for making time to share it with us here.
Thank you for inviting us to be a part of this movement of Love Plus Power. So again, this is the invitation to Brave Space by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. Together we will create brave space, because there's no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side.
Thank you.